What's up guys, June here, and in this video we're going to take a look at all of the different combat auras and talk about which ones you want to be pursuing for PvM and what ones you want to use in different circumstances, and for those of you who maybe don't own all of them yet, what ones you want to be saving up for. So let's get started. The first set of auras are by far the highest damage output auras. That is the Berserker aura for melee, Reckless aura for ranged, and Maniacal for magic. These only last for 30 minutes, which is about half as long as the other combat auras, and the cooldown is 5 hours, which is considerably longer, and they cost 50,000 loyalty points each, but they have a myriad of effects. The first of these is the first time you activate the auras, they will give you a visible boost to attack and strength by 10% of your level, and a visible reduction in your defense level by 15% of your level. One important note to get the most out of these auras is that you should really activate this after you've sipped from your overload, because the effect of the visible boost will stack on top of an overload if you use the overload first. However, it will not if you use the overload after you've used the aura. In addition, the overload will restore the visible drain on your defense level, which mitigates a little bit of the extra damage that this aura forces on you. On top of all of these visible effects, there are several invisible effects as well. The first is a passive modifier to your accuracy and your damage that increases both of those by 10%, which results in a total increase to your overall damage of about 21%. And there is also an invisible modifier to the damage taken, which increases that by 15%. Another thing worth mentioning is that the 10% boost to damage will not stack while you're using any of the damage boosting ultimate abilities like Sunshine or Berserk. So, in effect, this aura will provide you with 21% higher damage in general, and while you're using a damage-boosting ultimate ability, an additional 10%. And overall, while taking into account that overloads will restore the visible drain to your defense, you'll take about 15% more damage. Because of the damage boost to sustain damage, you'll notice that you're taking tons more damage, and it might feel uncomfortable at first, but the way that I like to think about this is because you're dealing 21% higher damage, the duration of the fight is going to be much shorter as a result of that, and even though you're taking more damage in the short term, you're dealing out such a considerable amount more damage that you'll probably actually use a little bit less food overall than you would conventionally. Overall, this set of auras is not comparable to any others in terms of damage output, and these will probably be your go-to except for a few specific scenarios. I personally would not recommend using these as a tank, either at Virago or at raids, and I would not recommend these for very, very high enrage or Raxor kills, but pretty much anywhere else, this is definitely the ones that you want to default to. The next set of auras is one most people are probably familiar with. These are the accuracy boosting auras, the Brawler aura for melee, Sharpshooter for ranged, and Runic accuracy for magic. They each have a duration of 1 hour and a cooldown of 3 hours, and the cumulative cost for the highest tier is 107,000 loyalty points each. And what these do is they boost your hit chance in the respective style by 3, 5, 7, or 10% depending on what tier you own. And because they're boosting your hit chance, they boost your overall damage output by extension. One important thing to remember with these is that anytime you're able to get 100% hit chance against an enemy, these auras are absolutely useless, so this is going to do you no good whatsoever on lower or mid-level bosses like KBD or the Dagannoth Kings, where you can get 100% hit chance pretty easily with just overloads and turmoil. However, against higher level bosses like Araxor, Nex, Kalphite King, Virago, raids, etc., where you can never get 100% hit chance, these are probably your second best choice for improving your overall damage output. The next most useful aura, in my opinion, is Dark Magic, which is a great filler aura because it works for any combat style. It lasts for a total of 1 hour and has a cooldown of 3 hours, and it only costs 42,500 loyalty points. And the effect that this has will trigger randomly, and it deals auto-attack damage in whatever style you're using equal to the lesser of two numbers, either 15 times the relevant combat stat plus 1, which at level 99 is 1500 damage, or 5% of the enemy's maximum HP. So as long as the enemy you're fighting has more than 30,000 HP, it's always going to default to the former of those equations, and you'll be usually dealing 1500 damage for the first hit. And it hits a total of 4 times every time it triggers. First for the full 100% of that damage, then for 80%, then for 64%, and then finally for 51.2%. If you're 100% accurate against your opponent, this is probably the best damage output aura, and even if you aren't 100% accurate against your opponent, this is a great thing to use when your accuracy auras are on cooldown, because it can deal up to about 10 to 15% more overall damage. The next aura is a little bit different, and not all of you guys are going to have this because this isn't purchasable from the loyalty program. It's actually part of the Gold Premier membership package this year, and that's the Mahjarrat aura, which is another typeless aura. It has a duration of 1 hour, and it's actually 2 auras in one. The daily aura has a cooldown of 23 hours, and the monthly aura has a cooldown of 30 days, and the daily effect is that it boosts all your damage dealt by 5% and also boosts your divine location cap by 5%. And the damage output on this is weaker than the 3 auras that we've talked about previously, but it's definitely something that you could consider using if all of your better auras are on cooldown. However, the monthly effect boosts all damage dealt by 50%, and the same for your divine location cap, and as you would expect, this is extremely powerful. You're dealing 50% more damage. This is effectively like having Death Swiftness or Sunshine active 100% of the time. And because of that, JMods have built in a lockout that prevents you from getting any boss kill timer updates or kill count updates to prevent people from getting the Reaper title obscenely easily. But if all you're going for is loot or anything like this, there is nothing that even remotely compares to the amount of damage that you can do with the Mahjarrat Berserk effect, so this is definitely something that you want to use, and use wisely. Finally, we get to the last resort DPS auras. The first is Invigorate, which of course is typeless, and the duration is 1 hour and the cooldown is 3 hours, and it comes in 4 tiers, and purchasing the highest tier costs a cumulative total of 115,000 loyalty points. And the effect that this has is it saves a little bit of extra adrenaline when you're using an ultimate ability, similar to the way the Ring of Vigor does, and it also stacks with the Ring of Vigor. So for the highest tier, it saves you 10% adrenaline, and in combination with the Ring of Vigor will leave you with 20% adrenaline after using your ultimate ability. This aura can be really good in combination with trying to get speed kills with Revenge, like I talked about in the last video, because you can get back to your 50% adrenaline for thresholds very, very rapidly. But in general, if you're using this for steady standard PvM, it's not going to influence the amount of damage you're able to do very much at all. So this really should be a last resort thing. The same goes for Inspiration, which is our last aura, which is typeless, has a duration of 1 hour and a 3-hour cooldown, and costs only 23,000 loyalty points. The effect this has is you'll gain an additional half of an adrenaline point for every hit, and bleeds or AoE effects will gain that additional adrenaline for every hit inflicted on every enemy. So things like Corruption Blast and bleeds and area of effect attacks can really generate a lot of adrenaline. However, in general, this isn't going to improve your DPS very much either. You'll be able to do thresholds slightly more often, but in general your DPS output's only going to be a few % higher than if you were not using an aura at all. Finally, I want to talk about the 2 most common mistakes that I see with aura selection for bossing, and that is the Vampirism and Penance aura. These both have a duration of 1 hour, cooldown of 3 hours, and they cost 23,000 loyalty points, and their effects are very similar. Vampirism allows you to heal up to 5% of damage hit to enemies, though this caps at 50 per hit, and for Penance, your 5% of damage that is dealt to you will be restored to your prayer points. And people tend to use these things because they think that they'll conserve supplies and they'll last longer at bosses. However, because of the compromise to your DPS, you're actually really not doing yourself any favors. You're doing so much less DPS that the fight's going to go on for longer, and even though you're restoring a little bit of HP or prayer points, you're going to end up using more things in the long run. And there's only one exception to this. Penance is an acceptable aura if you're tanking a really, really high damage boss with a Spirit Shield, because the amount of prayer drain on a Spirit Shield, it's very easy to get smited out. So for example, if you're north tanking at Yakimaru, you're base tanking at Yakimaru, or if you're bomb tanking at Virago, those are places that you definitely can be forgiven for using Penance. But other than that, you really never want to be using these auras outside of Slayer. They're great for Slayer if you just want to AFK and have like a no supply run, but definitely don't employ these at bosses. Try and use the auras I talked about previously, and I think you guys will notice a very, very impressive increase in your overall damage and your success at those bosses. So thank you all very much for watching. I hope this was an informative video. Let me know in the comments if you have any questions or feedback, and I will see you in the next video.